last night I was like, I'm just gonna take a look at this, kind of get it in my mind so that I can prepare for this monumental problem that's coming this week. This push block problem.
It's going to be huge.
And I went in there and I looked at the number where it's like how far you should move the push block as you're pushing it. And I just multiplied that number by 0.3. And then I hit play and then it was fine.
Butterscotch Shenanigans.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 140 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast, Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I'm the dueler of boots.
I'm Sam and I sometimes leave things in the room I was just in.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today is March 5th, 2018.
Whoa, that was a surprisingly coherent date.
Very professional.
Yeah. Before we get started, we have a warning. Anything could happen in this show. There's going to be profanity, and then we're going to talk about stuff. So if you don't want to hear either of those things, or if you're a child, then leave.
Yeah, it's going to be exactly like that. There will be profanity, and then we will talk about stuff.
Yeah, every section of this podcast is prefaced by just a series of sort of incoherent, raging swears.
Yep.
So
let's try to do it up front so that if you don't like that stuff, you can skip it and then just hear the content.
Filter forward, as we call it. You be the person you want to be, and if other people don't like it, get out of the way.
Yeah. It's kind of like how, if you drink a 5-hour energy, you steal 5 hours of energy from later in the day and you front load it. We do the same thing with our swearing. We keep it clean later, but right now, it's about to get real. All right, so what's happening over the past week? We made a bunch of progress on Levelhead. It is continually blasting forward. This is our current game project that we're working on. For those familiar with something like Mario Maker, where you build platformer levels, that's kind of the vein that this game is in, and it's for PC, mobile, iOS, and Android. We are trying to figure out, over the past week, we were working on the campaign for the game, which is the question of how do we introduce content to players in a way that they can understand, because we don't want to just drop this big level editor on people that has a million different pieces in it. It's very overwhelming.
Yeah, and unlike something like Super Mario Maker, where you're coming from a franchise that's decades old.
Yeah, you've played Mario games for 30 years.
Yes, you know what a mushroom is and does, right? You're not necessarily going to know what the glove power-up does in this game. And so we have this sort of dual problem where we essentially have to make a really good platformer
and teach it
inside of this game that is ostensibly more so about the sharing and building levels. So what we decided to do is actually we took a note out of Kerbal Space Program's book. And I think both you guys played the crap out of that game. Yep. I didn't play it very much because of this exact reason, which was when I played it is before they had their science update, their career update. And what would happen is you hop in the game and they're like, cool, you build rockets in this game. And then they give you 400 pieces.
Yeah.
And they're like,
go build some rockets. Be a rocket scientist.
And this is exactly the thing we were trying to avoid with the platformer, which is we don't want to hit you with, 400 different level components. And currently I think we have 50 something
like that. Yeah.
Plus a bunch of different properties and things embedded in each one. And so there's actually there's a huge amount of information in there. And of course, once you get into 12 to 15 different pieces, it's kind of like an alphabet. So you essentially get a lot of what's called generativity, which is the ability to just make a lot of different stuff with actually a very small number of components. And so the complexity gets huge really fast.
Yeah.
So we wanted to solve this problem of introducing the mechanics and teaching them, and teaching the players also how to even just navigate with the player, because a big part of it is if you don't understand what feels fun in the first place, then you can't possibly build good levels to publish.
Right. So
the way we've decided to solve this is with a campaign, which, unlike a traditional platformer where, I guess the campaign kind of is the focus of the game, like beating the campaign, capturing, beating your Bowsers and recapturing your princess, whatever the situation is. We decided to make it so that the campaign itself unlocks the content for the editor. So like Kerbal Space Program, where you would fly to the moon from a mission, get some science, do science outside ship, come back, and that would allow you to unlock stuff on a tech tree. We have a tech tree, essentially, and you can unlock, fast enemies, and then you can unlock big enemies and spike enemies and all this other stuff. And so you kind of choose your path, and then as you're beating the levels and completing them 100%, then you can kind of come in and fill out your editor and do new level stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
And we're still kind of exploring what this means, because a lot of games actually do have level editors. Like a lot of racing games have track editors and all these different things. But in Levelhead, that's supposed to be the focus of the game. And so we have this sort of design problem that we are still sort of wiggling our way through, which is the problem of if we make players focus on playing the game first, then does it seem like that's what the game is?
Right.
And then they get to do the level editor once we've sort of shown them enough of the game. So that's something that we still have to sort of figure out. And then there's the problem of sort of the pacing of unlocking new content, because the content that you're unlocking is for the level editor, not for the gameplay part, right? So you're playing your way through the campaign, and normally if in a game with unlocks, like you do a bunch of combat, you get a better sword from the combat, and then that goes back into the combat, right? But in this game, you're unlocking stuff for a different sort of part of the game. So so we have a lot of sort of design issues to figure out. But rest assured, we'll figure it out. It'll be fine.
Also, I mean, it's already coming along effectively. I think we have 20-ish levels or something like that. And you can just sit in the campaign, and my guess is that people are going to batch their sort of what they do. So they're going to sit there and just like play through a string of levels until they get to a hard one. And they're going to be like, okay, and then go spend their points, which is exactly what I ended up doing. Yeah. Hit a point where I was like, I don't want to deal with this right now. So I go to the tech tree, fill it out, and then go play in the editor a little bit. So, we're going to figure out a few ways to kind of make it, to integrate the whole thing. I suppose currently they're very separate, but we're going to try to kind of shove them back together a little bit.
And one of the things that we're sort of grappling with, and I think we're starting to land on some solutions, is the problem of levels in platformers tend to be very fast, right? So if you've played Mario, Super Meat Boy, any of these games that are level-based platformers, beating a level can typically be under a minute, right?
Oh, that's not really true for Mario games.
I was thinking about this morning.
Yeah, those are much bigger.
That's true.
Even the first level in Mario probably even still is over a minute. And as they go, they tend to be on the order of like, because I think there's a 5-minute timer.
They actually cover from an overall design standpoint, the Mario levels tend to cover a really long distance.
Yeah, really long.
Like you tend to just be running most of the time.
That's true.
Versus the more of the aesthetic that we're taking on the design side is actually something closer to Meat Boy.
Right.
And
those are fast.
Which is, okay, here's your compact level.
You're going to die a lot.
Meat Boy, you almost always can see the whole screen.
Yep.
If you can't, then the level's actually fucking huge. But in our case, it's sort of a weird combo between the two, where your camera's locked on your character, so you can't actually see the whole level, but the whole level actually is a quick hit sort of a thing. So, so yeah, it's been an interesting, because I think you just need to teach people. I think that's kind of the thing where like we just need to teach people stuff. It's not about the experience of running through.
Well, and the design challenge that comes from that too is if levels are fast. Let's say we have 50 levels in the campaign, right? And we have 50 things to unlock in the tech tree. That means you're going to be unlocking something every couple of minutes, which is still a pretty blistering pace, right? Yeah. And so we have to kind of figure out ways to spread those things out enough that people will sort of play levels for a while, then go use the editor for a while.
We could do. I just had an idea.
Yeah.
So in the level branching path for the campaign, as players go through, we could have a node that pops up, which requires that you publish a level, for example, in order to move on to the next section of the game.
Well, that's going to flood our level browser with garbage.
Well, we can just tag those ones with garbage and then not show them up.
Because the whole idea is just to push them together.
Right.
That might actually work.
Yeah. So there's the way that Nintendo dealt with this in Mario Maker is they give you just a handful of things at the beginning, and then in order to unlock more stuff, you have to place those particular things into your level and then beat the level. So they'll be like, oh yeah, you got to like put a bunch of spikes down and then beat the level with spikes. But because you're building the level, you can choose where the spikes go. Yep. So you can just like put them in an unreachable place,
just don't worry about them,
and then just run past them and beat the level. So we wanted something to be a little bit more
legit,
a little bit more meaningful than that actually like means something to sort of know what that thing is.
I will say it has been really fun making, because the editor's so robust that it is really fast to make levels and play and practice them and stuff.
You built like 20 something levels over the weekend.
Yeah. But it's been a lot of fun. I think keeping in mind as a designer, as you play with a platform in particular more, you'll start getting a feel for the things that actually feel really good as a player to do. And this can even come down to stuff like and if you played a Super Mario game, you probably noticed this, but the placement of coins is extremely important because it can be the sort of thing where if you put a coin sort of errantly off to the side of what the path should be, then the player won't be able to cleanly just run and jump through it, which feels amazing, right?
Yeah.
They'll have to like jump through it and like, oh fuck, and come back and like bump that one. And so a lot of what I end up doing is like you lay down the general field level and then you have to kind of tighten it and tighten it and tighten it
Yep.
to make it so that each one of those jumps can happen in a way that feels really good. And each one of the coin packs is in a particular place that feels it's not easy to access, but once you do get the appropriate trajectory or whatever else, then you just kind of like, smash through all those things. So it's
And then you
really
get that satisfying like blink, 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 blink as you pick up all the coin. Yeah, it's good.
It's really odd.
So yeah, we have no specific announcements about alpha or beta or anything like that yet, but we will.
Yep, we're just getting everything ready for GDC right now. So
Yeah.
we got to show the game off to a few people.
So otherwise, we want to talk a little bit about pit people.
Although before we get into that, we may want to say, because we did tell people previously on the podcast that we were going to be in beta before GDC.
Yeah.
So we should probably say that is not likely. Yeah. And in general, anytime we give you a date, which we have said in the past, if we ever give you a date, ignore it.
Just ignore it. It's just a goal.
Unless we actually say it is happening on this day.
Right.
Because that means it's probably already done, because that's the only reason we would say it's happening on this day.
Yeah. So we'll have some.
Keep you updated.
We'll keep you informed.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And if you are interested in becoming a tester for our stuff, then you can head on over to bit.ly/powerful-bscotch-abs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you can sign up to be part of our anti-bug squad. That's the group of people who are going to be tapping to help us test Levelhead. So
and it probably will be done in phases. We just don't know what those phases will look like yet.
they're going to look awesome.
They are going to look awesome.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of things that look awesome, pit people.
Yeah, Pit People finally came out of early access.
What is it?
On the 2nd. So it's the newest Behemoth game. So Behemoth is famous in particular for Castle Crashers, though the game that I like from them is, what's their platformer called?
Battle Block Theater.
Battle Block Theater.
Mm-hmm. Which also has a very robust level editor.
Which does. Yeah. And also, I think the reason that I liked that game so much was the same reason that I got really excited about Pit People last night while I was playing it. And it's because Battle Block Theater, the level of personality in this game is just stupid. Like just everything about it is just oozing the fact that the developers of this game just do not give a fuck, right? but on the other side of that, though, they give a fuck a lot about the game.
Yeah.
Right. They just don't care about what they're supposed to do and about what they think you might want from them. Mm-hmm. So, and this is really apparent in Pit People. So I booted this up last night because I've just been waiting for it to come out of early access because, as a rule, I don't play early access games because then I don't get to play them for the first time as they were meant to be, sort of harking back to our discussion last week. So it finally came out. I was pumped, bought a copy for my wife, and then we sat down and played it last night. I should also say this is the first time I've sat down with a desktop gaming machine, so like nice big monitor and stuff, with noise canceling headphones with high quality sound and played a game.
So as opposed to sort of hunching over a small laptop screen on a dining table in an ergonomically horrifying situation.
Yep. So there might,
but even further,
be some conflation.
There's some there's some conflation. So I want to admit that too.
Okay, sure.
But because it even used to be in the past that I would basically ignore sound and music and stuff. I just didn't. It wasn't a thing that seemed important to me.
A lot of people do this.
I think it's because I've never had good.
Yeah, well, we know that like 60-something% of players on mobile don't play games with sound on.
Yeah, well, I think on mobile, because like mobile sound quality is garbage, and
bad.
You're usually playing, on a train, like places where you can't just listen.
But it's a bummer because some games, if you jack in, like the experience is completely different once you actually.
Well, yeah. So that was the thing with this is everything about even more so than the games. I have recently been trying to play games actually listening, with headphones and stuff. So I played Fallout and some other ones like that. And it definitely felt way better, but still not like this. Like there's something about it that was just so integrated and cohesive, where just everything, there was a sound effect for everything, but it kind of just was, it was just sort of subtle, So like just everything that happened had something going on. Right. But I think my favorite part about it is how the animation and the story design is done, because you can tell that everything that they're doing, they give you reasons that everything is the way it is, So unlike a normal because there's sort of RPG elements to it. So unlike a normal RPG where you just have levels and you just have armor, you just have these things, or when you go out on the field, you can see your character's HP. There's just all these things that just happen in games. And we talk about this a little bit internally, that are just there because people know that stuff is there. Right. But they don't actually make sense. It doesn't make sense to live in the game world, but there's a moment when you start playing where one of your characters asks, how come I can see my health? Right? And this is explained away because earlier you joined souls with your teammate, which also isn't explained. There's this moment of dialogue. You meet this character for the first time. He asks you, would you like to join souls? And you can say yes or no. If you say no, he just flips his beard and hair upside down relative to each other. So now his hair is his beard and vice versa, and asks you again. And so you can't. How about now? Yeah, he just says, how about now? And there's no way to say no, actually. He just keeps it rotating.
Yeah, it's like every time you say no, his beard and hair keep flipping.
Exactly. So they wanted to give you the sense that you got to make a choice here instead of just explaining a thing.
And did they use that? Did they have like a screenshot that said meaningful dialogue choices?
They did not have that.
Now wait, let me ask you this. When his beard and hair flip and you then join souls, is his hairstyle locked into that for the rest of the game?
That I didn't actually notice. Because I was wondering that too.
They're pretty similar. He's got like a swoopy hairdo and a swoopy beard.
But they are different.
They are different.
They are different.
They are different.
Subtle.
So then you then finally have to say yes, like let's merge souls, right? And they have there's this crazy cutscene, but it's Behemoth style, right? So it's all like vectory, minimal animation, but everything's very bouncy and stuff.
A lot of squish.
A lot of squish. So nothing really happens, you know, but just it feels very epic. There's this epic soul binding scene. People are screaming. All this stuff is happening. And then you get to the end of it and you're just like, I don't really understand why that happened. But now 10 minutes later, when, you know, your character inside of a battle now asks, why can I see my health? It says, hey, remember when we joined souls earlier? You know, that's why. And that's it. And so they have these
photocopier situation.
Exactly.
You don't need a good reason.
You just need a reason.
Yeah.
And they do this throughout where there's a reason that everything is the way it is, and not a good reason, just a reason. And the animation is just, again, like they clearly don't give a fuck. So it's the same kind of minimal style that we like to have, where we want to get as much mileage out of minimal assets as we can. And so kind of in the main screen where you're going from battle to battle, where you're driving this little like ox cart thing that has cannons on it for whatever reason, you know? So you're driving this thing around, there's like kind of a fog of war around you. But the fog of war is just, I'm pretty sure, one art asset.
Yeah.
That's just this like crazily drawn little like piece of cloud. And they just duplicate it everywhere, and it just kind of moves around as you're moving around. And so because everything is moving, it all just feels really good.
Like fog.
It just feels like fog. And when you get into like in the city, and I was like, and I noticed it much more when I got up from my computer to take a break, and then I was kind of looking at my screen from across the room. It's fucking chaos because they got this crazy, hilarious music just kind of going on in the background. It's got a very fast beat.
Isn't everything dancing?
Everything is dancing really fast in these very extravagant. So like every building, like the roof will be flying off on every beat and coming back on. Like the whole building is like alive and moving. And so
I remember seeing a GIF of the arena.
Yeah,
and it's like a coliseum, but it's kind of shaped like a wedding cake, right? Like it's a building that has multiple tiers, and each tier is a separate sort of ring that's then sort of bouncing on top of the rings underneath it, and the whole building is coming apart.
And it's just pure chaos, right? So you even have when they give you unlock multiplayer after you beat a few tutorial things, you know, and when you do that, they just call it like the space phone. And so then it's a building that's just a big like phone booth that then has a cord going up into space. And that's into space. And that's how they explain what multiplayer is. So just everything is explained in this crazy universe that they've made. And so I was just playing this game, and I was just so filled with glee as I was playing this thing. And I honestly didn't even like the gameplay that much. It was fun, and I got a kick out of it. I think I'm going to keep on playing it because like there's enough to it that I can see how it could get pretty fun. But just how well they tied together everything about it and made it it was simultaneously absolutely unambiguous that I was playing a game, and somehow just not at all, right? It did such a good job of sucking me into it, despite the fact that it's what everybody would call, you know, it's 2D, cartoony as all hell, you know. The anime, there's nothing fluid about it. All the animations are a few frames, and yet, you know, they just did everything so cohesively and packed it full of personality and soul that like you just really.
Here's the thing:
feels really good.
When if you make a game that sort of pushes realism, then you just can't have any of that stuff.
No, you can't.
Because you've got to emulate what the real world does, which, for example, buildings' roofs don't fly off as they dance to the music.
They do not do that
in real life.
Yep.
They just sit there boringly as buildings.
Well, they brought in Stamper as the guy who did their narration for Battle Block also. So they brought him in this time, and so he's again like in the various songs he's just doing weird stuff, and otherwise he's narrating. I think as the space bear who is who is like the god that crashed into Earth that caused all the chaos to happen.
because there's space bear blood.
There's space bear blood
raining on the Earth now, and that's why. That's why the game is happening.
His narration is again just fucking hilarious.
I just remember seeing early. I think it was maybe 2 years ago when they first started working on the game.
Yeah,
and they had a video up. Yeah, and they had just the opening scene of the blueberry farmer learning how to fight because his blueberry fields got destroyed by space bear blood. So he has to now go out and learn how to fight or something. And then they had a scene where they introduced the mechanic of people wearing helmets being sort of immune to stuns or something like that. And the way they introduced it was you're in the middle of a battle and all of a sudden a space shuttle fucking crashes through the roof of the building you're in. And on the side in spray paint is just written "Helmets Forever," and then a bunch of dudes wearing helmets come out of the spaceship.
Now I gotta fight them,
and they're just super pumped about helmets.
This is the opening sequence.
It's like right at the beginning.
Or the second opening sequence.
And so that's how they teach you how helmets work.
Yeah, and again, like it's the same deal. Just everything has an in-world explanation, you know. And
I think you mentioned something before we started the cast, which was that even in the UIs, like some of the UIs are not. I guess most of the UIs actually are confusing in some way, somehow confounding. Yeah, but what they did is they chose not to go for usability, but to go instead for just pure unadulterated joy.
So like
integration into the game.
That's how things are in this world.
Well, that's what, with that whole like their multiplayer lobby again is a building that is a phone booth that is part of, and it's dancing. It's part of this crazy dancing world, right? That it doesn't tell you. It doesn't say. Actually, I think they put they drew a Post-it note on it that says like multiplayer here or whatever, right? Right. And they have these like little Post-its slapped up to sort of help explain what some of the things are.
They put Post-it notes on it.
Yeah, it's just
fucking great.
It's just wild. So yes, I still I was using the UI to try to upgrade my characters, you know, and try to figure out because you can give them helmets and stuff, but nothing's explained, and it's very. I still don't quite understand even what's is happening, right. But I started to kind of piece it together, and which also. There's that thing that's easy to forget too, that there is that joy in
figuring stuff
out that really clean, fully explained tutorial UIs actually take away. Yeah. And sometimes you need to know exactly how things work immediately. And in that case, you don't have a choice but to try to make it very clean and clear. But there is something to be said for being able to just provide enough information that once a person gets it, they now get it. And give the person a chance to kind of figure it out by just trying stuff and getting it. Because I'm pretty sure like it seems like there are 3 kinds of helmets in this game, and they're all actually the same. So like their base stats are the same. Because I kept on like swapping out new ones, but like nothing seemed to change. And I think they're just decorative differences, right? But that was the thing I had to learn.
Different kinds of damage.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, so there's like heavy helmets, light helmets, and so on, right? So they're actually just the same. But then it turns out I found some later that add some special stats. So then it turns out it's kind of like how we do stuff with Crashlands a little bit, right? And so I'm pretty sure that's how it works now. But I'm still, I'm open to seeing some new discoveries.
Yeah, I think and we've talked about this a lot in house, especially with the update coming to Crashlands and some future plans for it. Where anyone with Levelhead, where starting to view actually the figuring out of how the game works as a secondary game.
That's part of the game
to the game, right? Whereas with Crashlands, we try to be extremely explicit all the time, which
people don't want to read a textbook to figure out how to play your game.
They would rather struggle.
They just want to poke things.
Well, the thing is, what they think that they wouldn't rather struggle. And this is the problem. A lot of what we were trying to avoid with Crashlands was we didn't want people to be emailing us and hitting our support constantly, asking us how to do things. And so we aired, I think what we all believe now is too far on the side of explaining everything and didn't give people a chance to discover things. But it is an interesting problem on our side is that the less we tell people, the more likely it is that there's going to be a subset of people who hate the game because they hate having to figure stuff out for themselves, and that there'll be a subset of people who are okay with it, but are going to now just pester us and pester each other. And
but maybe that's fine.
Maybe that's fine. Well, it's an interesting question because how does Terraria and Minecraft get away with this, right? Because they don't tell you jack shit.
Yeah. Ferrari's like, here's a fucking copper pickaxe. Go. I don't even know what you're doing here.
Yeah, exactly. You're just
I don't know why you're here. You just made a character and now you're standing on a planet.
Yep.
There's no explanation.
No explanation. There's no anything.
You talk to a guy who's like, you can use that pickaxe on stuff. You're like, thanks.
Thanks.
That's the only thing I have.
Then otherwise you just have to go through your controls. You actually look in your menu, you look at the controls and figure out what can I do, yeah, I think there is something to be said for that. And so maybe we just need to be a little bit more adventurous and risky in terms of how our players.
I think it kind of again comes back to the theme of 2018.
Yep.
Which is
who gives a
shit,
fuck,
right?
It's 2018. People figure it out.
People figure it out, and I think it's fun. It is fun to figure stuff out.
Yeah.
So,
but we will have to take a hardline stance in our support areas and in our communities.
Amen.
Where we say, figure it out.
Figure it out.
Just figure it out. Otherwise, in the news, we want to talk a little bit about life.
Yeah.
About
what we got
problem solving.
Yeah. I had a very, my weekend was full of all kinds of interesting problems, mostly revolving the internet. But
those are the least good problems to have.
It was the internet and also dual booting.
Well, not using the internet to solve problems,
getting it
but when the internet is a problem,
right? Solving the internet problem,
yeah,
and also solving a dual booting problem. I'm not going to go into those because nobody gives a fuck,
right? Because it's 2018.
Because it's 2018. And but there was one thing that was an easy problem, which is I had a bulb go out in our bedroom. Whatever you call that thing, a fan.
Fan.
You know what I'm talking about.
That thing with blades.
The thing with blades.
The thing with rapidly spinning blades that we all dangle over our heads as we sleep. That thing.
Yep,
it really makes me more comfortable. You know?
Yeah. So the bulb was flickering, and I was pissed because it's an LED that I bought like a year ago. It actually turns out it's supposed to last for decades. There's actually 3 LEDs in my house that I bought a year ago, all of which have been flickering recently. So anyway, it's not the time for that. The point was, this thing actually finally went out, and so I went and got a new one, put it in, forgot to turn the fan on because I had to turn it off to do this, whatever. So then that night I slept and it got too hot, and I was like, oh yeah, fuck the fan, right? So turn it on, and now it just makes this noise. It's just kind of this like, it's not even grinding, that's the wrong word. It's just, it's as if there's like a brush in there that's just kind of brushing something as it goes, So now just all I did was to change the light, and now it's making this noise. So then slept with that going on for 2 nights. Okay. And then yesterday, and each day I would wake up and be like, God, what am I going to have to like hire somebody, I guess? Cause I don't know how the fuck to fix a fan. Maybe I could just spray some WD, so I was thinking through, what am I going to do about this? I was thinking about all these kinds of ways to solve this problem.
Did it turn out you put the light
it all seemed really complicated.
No,
it wasn't even that. So then yesterday afternoon, I had been dealing with all this internet bullshit. I was doing all this stuff, and I was in the bedroom, since where our router is. I was dealing with all this, and I was hearing this fan go. I was like, what the fuck is going on with this thing? So I just stood up on the bed, and I literally just poked it. I just poked like the casing of the fan. I just poked it a little bit, like very minimal force, just poked it, and it was quiet. And then the problem is now solved.
So you sat there for 2 days being like,
I sat there for 2 days
just moping,
trying to figure out what I was going to do about this, and trying to think of all these complicated things, how much it was going to cost to hire a handyman to come over or whatever. And then finally I just poked it just to see, and it was just fixed now.
So you worried far too much before doing anything.
Yeah.
All right. So
sometimes you got to take a simple dumb act. Sometimes the answer is dumb. Actually, often the answer is dumb.
So I have a similar story. So in Levelhead, we have push blocks. These are blocks that you can push.
Okay? That makes sense.
So are you guys still tracking
with you
this?
so far?
Still with me? All right.
Very complex. I'm on.
So push blocks are an interesting problem in a platformer, because in a platformer, you need to be able to run into walls and have them stop you, right? And a wall is literally anything solid that you can run into, right? Which, by the way, is a push block, right? So you've got this thing that's supposed to stop you when you hit it, but you're supposed to push it. So you can't push it if you're stopped, right? You see the conundrum. So my original solution to this was to always be, checking in front of the player if there's a push block there, and then just move the push block in advance so that the wall sort of just gets out of the way,
so that you don't actually run into it.
You never run into it. You just sort of levitate it in front of you.
Use the force.
So you never actually make contact with the push block. And so that was my original solution, and it was getting the job done in the sense that you could push the blocks, but there's something off about it, which was that they felt like they were just made of paper, because you're just running at full speed. And then you touch this block, and then it's just moving at your full speed as well. And so it's as if there's no resistance, right? And so we'd been talking about this for weeks, and I was like, oh, this fucking push block thing. Like, I need to really spend some time.
Had you tried poking it before worrying about it?
Here's the thing. I had done a whole bunch of stuff, and I spent several hours trying to get it to go. And I was like, I don't know. I need these to slow down, right? And so then last night, I was like, I'm just going to take a look at this, kind of get it in my mind so that I can prepare for this monumental problem that's coming this week, this push block problem.
It's going to be huge.
And I went in there and I looked at the number where it's like how far you should move the push block as you're pushing it. And I just multiplied that number by 0.3. And then I hit play and then it was fine. So, because I'm like, if I just move myself by 30% less when I push a block and move the block by 30% less, then now there's resistance.
Slower now.
My speed is not reduced. I'm just moving myself less relative to my speed. Right?
That sounds very wonky.
Right? Because like I have a speed variable that normally lets me move. But if I'm pushing a block, then I just keep my speed variable the same, but all my future movement is just reduced a bit by the block's resistance. Yeah. So
so I
just put times 0.3. There we go. Now
2-minute solution.
I poked it and it works. So
that's wonderful.
So this kind of comes down to this. Adam came up with the term to explain this over the weekend. I don't know if this is already a term, but
I don't either. But I would
hit us.
Sam asked for a term for something else, but a related problem that we've been falling into, and for some reason I was thinking about this one. This where you basically latch on to a solution that you have in mind, or sort of a range of solutions for this problem you're trying to solve that prevents you from being able to even entertain the idea of other solutions. So I'm calling this solution blindness, sort of as a reference to snow blindness. Yeah. Where in snow blindness, you're like in a blizzard, or actually not in a blizzard, but just in a place that's pure white. So that after a while, you actually just can't.
You can't tell where
where anything is, or what anything is, or what size this thing is. Like just everything becomes incomprehensible because there's too much sameness and too much inability just to understand features anymore.
This is also related to attentional blindness, which is something that we are always battling as game designers, which is that once somebody starts watching a specific thing, they are completely unable to comprehend any other thing on the screen.
Yep.
Even if that thing is beeping and shrieking and flashing,
doesn't matter.
If they're looking at something else and trying to figure out a different thing, they won't even notice all the beeping.
So whenever anybody gets mad about those mobile tutorials, where they're like,
where they lock the whole
lock
screen,
the screen, they darken everything, and they have this blinking huge hand pointing at something. They're like, I hate this. I'm like, well, I mean, if you weren't so blind,
It was actually kind of fun how pit people handled this, because in pit people, like I was saying, everything is chaos, 24/7. But when they want you to do a thing, there's nothing ambiguous about it. The world is still chaos, but they'll make an arrow that is the size of the whole screen, right? And they just put it on the thing, and it's like it's the one thing not moving, right? And so they do that same idea.
Still have contrast though, right?
Yeah, exactly. They still provide the contrast, but instead of, because I remember we talked about this in the past with Quadrupus Rampage, where there was people couldn't figure out how to use the controls, even though the controls, the instructions were on the screen, right? And they would go because we watched some people playing on YouTube because they recorded themselves, and they would play for like 10 minutes straight with an instruction on the screen about how to do a thing, right in the middle.
Yeah, it's right above the Quadrupus's head. Yeah, it's like right there.
And they just couldn't see it.
Yeah, people would go for 20 levels. They would die 10 times, restart, and that thing would just be sitting there.
It's like use the bubble button to go invincible for a brief period of time, and they're like not using the bubble. They're just still running around. You're like, come on.
Yeah. This thing is literally single-digit pixels above the character's
here's
head.
the thing. I bet that pit people arrow, I bet it started as just a nice...
All
we need to do is just put a little arrow and people will see it. And then they kept like, what the fuck?
They kept making the arrow bigger until now the arrow just obscures the whole screen. Well, but something we talked about in Quadrupus was the idea that we tell people in the game, hold the dodge button to dodge. But people don't read that. All it says is hold the black button to dodge. So it's 7 words or something like that. People only read dodge button or black button. Right. Yep. And they're like, I just need to hit this button to get this fucking text to go away. Yep. And so then people view it as a thing that you tap, not as something that you hold. And then their gameplay is forever worse because they don't know how to use this mechanic.
But had we instead had one custom made level where you start on one side and there's a really big gap
and you can't just tap
across, people would have figured it out without us even having to tell them to do it. Right. So it is an interesting problem with trying to get people to understand what you're doing, is that I think none of us appreciated it enough at all until we put games in front of people that we had made that people will not fucking read anything. Yeah. And if they do, they will not internalize any of it.
Well, people are they're far more likely to try something than to read something.
Yeah, which isn't even a bad thing.
It's just how people are.
It's just how people are. But it's interesting because on the game designer side, it seems like you ought to be able to make a really cool, complicated system and then just explain it, you know, and then now somebody can do it and you're fine. But you actually need to work a lot harder than that as the designer. You need to come up with a way to teach people without, and this actually goes back to what we're talking about with delivering the content for Levelhead levels. We can't just give people everything because if we do, that's too much in one go.
You have no mental models for how to use it.
Yep.
You've never used it in the sense of you're like as the player. Yep. Which is really important, right?
It's too many options, and the lack of constraints actually, because now you don't know what to do, makes you do nothing. Yeah. And so yeah, it's just a kind of a surprising thing that it wasn't something I would have thought about as a player of games, that how hard it is to actually explain how they. So I started playing what was that their game? The new FTL, Into the Breach last night, which is actually a pretty complicated strategy game. And so they rely pretty heavily on teaching you stuff. Mm-hmm. But they don't do it with words. They show you a little thumbnail of like a little GIF kind of a thing of what happens when things happen. And that's how they teach you how to do it. So again, everybody around us seems to be realizing that you can't use words to teach stuff. Right. Mm-hmm. And so we got to figure out how to do the same thing, but it is way harder.
Yeah. It's wacky.
Yeah. It is pretty wacky. Okay. You guys have any other thoughts about this solution blindness? Well, I think it's just a good thing it's a good thing to be able to put a name to so that you can say things when it's happening.
Well, I think it's kind of like that scene in The Predator where they shoot it and it bleeds.
And then it rips their spine out.
Well, also that's a different scene. It's a different one I'm talking about. Because like the whole idea of naming something is the same thing as if it bleeds, we can kill it.
Yeah.
If it's got a name.
Now you understand the problem.
Yeah, you can deal with it.
Yeah, well, we should say that this happens in the studio pretty frequently because it's usually because one of us recognizes a problem that another person has to solve. Mm-hmm. And when we do that, we immediately we immediately think we know why that's a problem, which also then presents a solution in our minds, right? For how that thing should be fixed. And for some reason, it's true for all of us. It's true for every interaction I've had solving problems outside of this environment. For some reason, the solution is the thing you latch onto. Yeah. Not the problem. I don't know why that is, but that's actually seems to be just the default.
Well, because you want to get the problem away. You want to get it out.
Right. Yeah. So then you go to
the first solution you think of is you're like, yes, this is the thing that will get me away from this discomfort of having a problem. Right. Just do it.
Yeah. So then you go to the problem the person who can solve this problem and you say, here's the issue. Here's what we should do. And now all of a sudden the entire discussion is around that. It's around the doing of the thing
instead of the problem,
instead of the actual problem. And so, because we get trapped in this easily once a week where one of us does it, and so we needed a name to be able to point out, this is what's happening right now. We should take a step back and look at the problem instead.
Yeah. Well, so I had another thing from last week, as far as general life goes, which was I went back to cheerleading for the first time in like 7 years. So
of course,
a cheerleader back in college. And
now it's time to get back into
now,
it.
It's time. I'm 28. It's time to go. So,
it's time to do it again.
So my old coach had reached out to me because they don't have any guys on the team this year. And what that means is
Any.
So a bunch of the girls who came from schools where they had stunting experience with a partner haven't gotten to sort of keep that practice up. And so she's like, would you mind just coming in, having some fun, throw some people? So I was like, yeah, sure. So I spent about 6 weeks going to the gym, very intensely working on shoulders, and then finally went back last Monday. An interesting thing happened.
Because as a male cheerleader, your responsibility largely revolves around throwing people into the air.
Throwing it and then catching them when they come down.
And then, you also got to do that second part.
Yeah. That's which some people do forget to do. It's really shocking. So
throw them, walk away.
And it is weird because it is very much like riding a bike. So within, I think it
has some differences.
I mean, metaphorically, in terms of your ability to just like go do it again.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You got a little rust, of course, but it's not bad. So I was able to do some of the stunts that I'd done, after 3 years of practice back in the day, and which is really, really cool and really fun. But there's this one thing that happened, which was when we talked about this a little bit, this problem that I tend to get into, and a lot of people do, which is focusing on what the outcome is going to be instead of just what you're doing, right? And it becomes, in something like when you're doing art or game programming or whatever else, it's very easy, and it's kind of like the solution thing again, but it becomes very easy to not quite see where this is happening because, of course, you're working mentally most of the time. But when you're working on like a physical problem, which is, okay, I need to throw this person in the air and then get them into this particular position, it becomes very obvious when you stop doing the appropriate thing. So
Right, because people die.
So essentially what happened was I was trying to go into what's called a lib, which is essentially you go from having someone standing on your hands while you're standing up, it's like a two-stacked person, and then you put them up. So you raise your hands all the way above your head. And then in that case, the girl is standing on both of your hands with one foot. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then she's doing like a cool move up there. I
assume at that point she also puts on a trench coat, and then you go into a movie to buy one ticket.
Absolutely. Right. A very tall person.
Yeah. those movies where you need to be 12 feet tall to get in. I hate that shit.
But yeah, so the problem I was having was that when you go from the hands position, where the girl's essentially standing next to your shoulders, to that actual trick move, I would, instead of even just getting the person into that hands position, when I was thinking about the trick, I would just like throw them wrong. And so I would just throw them and then miss their feet. So I couldn't even catch to get into that first position.
What happens then?
You just catch them. Like usually your hands miss, and then both of you are like, fuck. And then
so you just kind of do like a panic grab.
You try to catch them by the waist so that you can you just get in the way.
So you just kind of help them ease back down to the ground.
They always hit the ground, but very gently, usually.
Okay. So you're like a human parachute, sort of.
More like a human pad. You're there to absorb the blow. Okay. But yeah. So the interesting thing to me is the coach just kept, the guy who's watching me said, he just looked at me, he's like, you're thinking about the trick. He's like, you can't think about the trick. You have to just do each part of this thing individually and only care about that. Otherwise you're going to keep on messing it up. And so by the end of the night, then I was able to just throw him without any problems, but it took like about 45 minutes of kind of getting back into that. Like instead of worrying about everything that was coming later, instead of worrying about that goal of just worrying about what exactly.
Well, that's also where expertise comes in too, because you actually do your best work when you're not consciously thinking about it at all. But when you've practiced it so much that it's now just in your fast subconscious memory, or it's just such a native thing that it becomes basically like language, so that it's just a thing that your brain just does without you having to deal with it. So yeah, you gotta learn how to not think.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I think that's good. All right, let's get on to some questions. These questions come from our listeners over at podcast.bscotch.net. So if you'd like to get your question on there, get over there. Everybody on a question. All right, first question comes from MySecretWeapon. As a full-time worker, husband, and father of 2 young kids, my indie dev time is pretty restricted. Usually I sacrifice sleep time for dev time in the evenings. Do you have any tips for making the most out of very limited dev time?
Make small stuff.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Don't fool yourself into thinking that you're going to make a damn MMO or, anything big, really.
Yep. And take all shortcuts available to you. So don't make your own fucking game engine. If you want to make games and only have a couple hours a night or whatever.
And I would suggest also, because I found, I don't know if it's just me, but I found it's fine to cut out like a bit of sleep to try to get the extra time in, but I'd actually do it in the morning, not in the evening.
At least in the morning when everybody else is just getting ready.
Yeah, the way I've always been is that for me personally, as the day goes on, it's just more and more likely that I'm going to get either something of other priority gets thrown in that slot, or I just get nuked by some other stuff I was doing, whatever else. And so that 1 or 2 hours of quote unquote extra time to put into whatever project can easily just get burned from life generally. But if you put it in the morning, then it's sort of that magic.
Mornings are magic.
Yeah.
Yep. And then otherwise,
start with M.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true.
That's right.
Yeah. Otherwise, really take an honest look at all the things that you do and ask, do I really need to be doing all these things?
Yeah. See if you can say no to more stuff.
Yep. And then also, if you got a good support system with a spouse or with family around or whatever, just remember that when you're trying to do this kind of stuff, when you're trying to pursue an intense hobby or a secondary career that you're trying to develop or whatever, that if you have people at your back who can help you out with that, and just explicitly talk to them about it and just say, hey, I'm trying to do this. I don't have enough time. And it's true. It's not because, you're doing too many things you shouldn't be doing, but you truly don't have enough time. And then just ask if there's some small things that can help you out with. So if a spouse, if you and your spouse can trade so that every other weekend, one of you just takes care of the kids, well, then the other one gets to go do something else, pursue a thing. If you've got family who you can do something similar with, then you can find ways to make that kind of thing happen.
Yeah. I think that's actually one of the biggest things to try to figure out is that block time is just always better than having 30 minutes each day or whatever. because you get to dive really deeply into big problems. And then over the next week or whatever, until you get your next block of time, you can kind of let those problems simmer and tweak your solutions and stuff.
Yeah. And then try to make it not something that you have to negotiate either with yourself or with the people around you. Get it all set up ahead of time so people just know what to expect. You've got systems in place. Everything is ready to go. So you don't have to have that discussion or that internal debate. It's 7 p.m.
Right. Should I go?
What should I do? I want to do this, but I have all these other things, you need to be able to already know what your priorities are and what you can do when and all of that.
But there's an important note here, which is if you talk to, say, your spouse or whatever about this and you say, hey, I need the time to put into this thing. So I need you to have my back, and then we can trade so that maybe every other night I'll watch the kids and then, or whatever. You need to really respect what you're asking of that person.
Oh, yeah, it's asking a lot.
Because if they come home or something and you're just fucking like sitting there watching Netflix when you said, I don't have enough time, so I need you to give up stuff. Oh man, you're in for a treat.
Well, you're in for a lack of trust for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And you deserve all the anger thrown at you in that scenario.
So you gotta really understand what's going down, and you got to be all in on it. Because it's 2018, so quit fucking around.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the way I did it with my wife was essentially said, like, I want to know. I'm curious about what you're doing, and I assume you were curious about what I was doing when this was sort of a similar situation. So, like, giving a debrief, where you're like, oh, here's all crazy cool shit that I got done today.
Yeah, we do a daily debrief.
Yeah, it's like super fun, and it keeps you. I think it helps you keep accountable, which stops you from doing the Netflix nonsense and some other things.
Yeah, because then you have to admit it when you fucked up.
Yeah, and sometimes that's okay, where you can be like, hey, I kind of fucked it up today.
Yeah, but then you get to talk about
why?
Yeah,
how to do better and all that stuff.
Well, it's a hard thing. I would recommend reading the book Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. There's a chapter in there about Stardew Valley, which is one guy who, again, he did not do this 30 minutes a day. He quit everything and worked on this game exclusively for 5 years, supported by his girlfriend at the time. And it's not easy to do this kind of thing. And fortunately, he had that kind of support. But even with that, he in the book, he talks about how he ran into these various scenarios where he was depressed because of how long it was taking. And he would sometimes go weeks without actually doing any work on the game whatsoever because he was just
couldn't look at it.
Yeah. And there's kind of that added burden of working on something completely alone, with no human contact for 8 hours a day at a time. So, there are some other difficulties that come along with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, but imagine the sort of relationship tension there too, is if the other person is supporting you to work full time and then you just don't.
Right.
You're
really disrespecting.
Do not, no matter what you do not do that.
Yeah.
Well, at least don't do it in a way that you're hiding it. You have to be completely honest. Be like, look, I am very fucking.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Right.
So
admit that the problems are and be working on improving them. But
because it's also the case that people can't expect you to work 60 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. Everybody has vacation weeks, and if they're in a normal day job or whatever. Yeah. And so, sometimes you need a day or whatever. It's fine. We just got to be honest about it. All right. Next question comes from TheUglyTurnip, who says, I've watched the Game Maker University videos. So there's a series of videos that we put up on our YouTube channel where we, go through how to make games in Game Maker.
I thought it was called the Butterscotch.
It's called Butterscotch University. Okay. Yeah. I'll rephrase the question. I watched the Butterscotch University videos, but then I was like, oh, wait, maybe I should write it down. Then I thought maybe the Coster brothers have something to say about this. Are there any techniques you use to keep knowledge up in your noggin?
Yeah.
Practice.
Well, practice for one. So do a thing that'll always bake it in. But so the memory works like you can think about like roads. So if you just read a thing, you've laid down just like a real shitty dirt road. Okay.
Then the next slight rain is just going to wash
it right away.
Yep.
But it's a good way to think about it. There's always torrential downpour happening in your mind.
Yeah.
And you're laying down these shitty dirt roads. So the best way to sort of protect yourself is actually to either do something with the knowledge, which comes down to if you're programming, actually go do it. Or if you just want to sort of bake it in, but without having to go do whatever the expertise side of things is, then you have to pick another medium to lay down a stronger road with. So usually one of the best ways to do it is actually with an image. So one of the ways that I memorized just an absurd number of stuff for some of my classes I took, as well as memorizing like credit card numbers and a bunch of other stuff, is using what was referred to as a person action object system, which basically you come up with a list of people, maybe like Optimus Prime, you know, Snoopy. And then you come up with a list of those people. You come up with a list of actions. Yeah. You come up with a list of actions, you know, kicking.
This comes from that moonwalking with Einstein.
Yeah, it's a common technique for memorizing things. Then you come up with an object. And then, so in the case of memorizing numbers, you just, any chunk of 3 numbers becomes a person doing a thing to a thing, right? It becomes very memorable. So you're like, all right, this one's Optimus Prime kicking a puppy, right? I will remember that for the rest of the time. That's number 169, whatever. So it's very easy then to remember something like a credit card because it just becomes a string of insane images.
So I take a different approach, which is, I want to first say that this is kind of fun because your description of sort of the torrential downpour plus the roads that are being built and whatever it's barely even a metaphor for what actually happens because it's so directly what actually happens, which is, which is every time you learn a thing or, you know, something happens in your mind, that's your neurons making weak connections and those connections get reinforced when they are repeated. And that's the only way they stick. Right. But even once they've stuck, they can still,
but that's not the only way they stick. This is the important thing because the reality is that yes, repetition's good, but repetition by itself is not the most powerful thing. One of the best ways to do it is to use different methods to put the information
do better encoding.
Yeah, better encoding. So that's exactly the idea. So just reading a thing, for example, is really weak encoding versus if you take the time, if you say, okay, here's this game maker concept. What would this look like? Like, how could I transform this particular Perlin noise, right? I now know how this works. How can I transmit this into just like a picture? And then you take like 5 minutes, draw a picture that somehow bakes in the idea, and that thing will stick with you unerringly, basically for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
because it's just
the rule is that you truly learn something once you teach it.
Yeah.
And the reason that is the case,
to yourself,
is because to teach something, you have to be able to explain it. You have to be able to understand it enough that you can understand what's confusing about it to somebody who doesn't know it, right?
Well, really, it comes down to
be able to hit it from different angles.
It comes down to touch. Like you have to play with the thing. You have to be like make it. Wiggle it around and try to do stuff with it. Otherwise, it doesn't do much. What were you saying?
So my strategy is different though, which is to take literally no time worrying about any of this. So I have no techniques. I don't memorize anything. I don't know any of my credit card numbers. I don't even know my phone number because I can look it up on my phone. Right. So
you're just an empty vessel.
I'm an empty vessel that thinks about stuff. Because here's the thing. So when I sit down to program, I don't have to look up barely anything at all. Right. Unless I go back and I'm like, oh shit, now I got to do this Python thing or something. And so I haven't actually used Python for like 2 years. Right. Now I'm gonna have to go look stuff up again. But in my day-to-day stuff, because I'm always in Node, always in whatever, there are things that I've been doing so much. It's my day-to-day job. I'm doing it constantly that my brain has already done all the work. It does the work while I'm working of embedding all these pathways, memorizing all these things, knowing what to do. And it has become embedded knowledge. I don't have to retrieve it. I don't have to encode it. I don't have to decode it. It's just embedded knowledge, right? Because it's also important to think too, when you're using these memory techniques like this encoding of using, action object, person, you encode it going in and then you also decode it coming out. Correct. Right. And so it's a very conscious kind of an exercise, which is perfect. If there's a bunch of stuff you got to memorize, you just have to know for some reason, but that actually isn't important enough for you to be using, then that's kind of your only option. Right. And so my strategy is just to put systems and processes in place that make it so that I don't actually have to know anything.
Well, I think the reality is that learning knowledge just like for the accumulation is a different, like you have to approach it completely differently than in terms of something that you actually use for skills. Yeah. Because the using of the skill itself. So for me with the hotkeys, right? I have my Inkscape, my vector artwork is hotkeyed like crazy. And when I first made it, I made the hotkeys and then I had the list next to me. And I just had to consciously, every time I was doing a thing, I'd look at it, hit the button. And now it's just like playing a piano. And I don't think about it. And the thing is actually the people who do, so basically by doing the work then with the system that you built, right, or saying, okay, this function does this. Yep. I'm going to use this now for this thing. After you do that a few times, and it's in there. Yep. With no problem. But I think when it comes to knowledge that is essentially divorced from practice, that's the part where you have to start using some tricks.
But you also still have to ask yourself, do I actually need to embed this? Because it's an important question. Like we feel like we feel like there's something embarrassing about not remembering things or not being aware of things or whatever. But those are really expensive. like crazy expensive to remember all of these little miscellaneous non-practice pieces of information. And if you don't have to, you're freeing up your mind just to not worry about stuff. You just get to focus on the things. There's nothing tickling. Like there aren't things tickling my mind. I'm never like, oh shit, is it somebody's birthday today? You know, because I just know I have no idea. I don't bother paying attention because I've got calendars, right? They'll tell me that.
So really what you just need is you need processes.
You need processes
for problem solving, for managing information, whatever.
And then you just trust that if things are important enough that you need to know them, that they will be in your process, or they're things that you practice. And so you will then know them because you practice them all the time.
Right. Yeah. I think my approach for learning any kind of a new thing has nothing to do with memorization. So let's say purl and noise. I basically read through a bunch of different articles about how it is done. Then I ignored all of that and I went to a blank game maker project and I was like, okay, based on sort of the rough high level concepts, I'm going to try to execute this just on my own, using my own ideas. Right. And I did it once and now I understand it forever. And so really it's a matter of, if you're watching the tutorials that we put up or whatever, don't sweat the small stuff. You know, don't get fixated on what exactly is written on each line of code. Think about it in terms of the concepts that are being presented. And then once you have a loose understanding of that concept, just go do it. Put the tutorial aside, ignore the code in it, go make your own version of that.
Which goes back to the reason that encoding thing is so useful, and the only way to do it is because semantics are the only thing you can remember. So when you're looking at a problem and you turn it into the concept instead of focusing on the details of how the problem is, solved, then that's the thing you get to remember. And so, because that's what our brains are. Our brains are good at stories, and stories are just semantics. And so that's what you have to focus on, that stuff. That's what you should be putting into your brain.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a reason why when you go through school, you always get homework assigned, right? You know, they don't just tell you stuff every day and then you just go home, right? It's always focused around the concept of doing work. And that's because that's actually how you learn.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of teachers don't actually know why homework is for, and so it doesn't actually serve that purpose. Right. It's important just to
the normal assumption is that homework is to evaluate how well you remember the thing you were told. Yeah. As opposed to homework being the thing that actually teaches you what the thing is.
Your teacher should get you over the hurdles by talking at you, get some preliminary context and then just give you work to do. Like the fact is that the more of your time learning that is spent doing work versus sort of being passive, having things happen to you and being lectured at and so on, the larger proportion of your time that is doing the work is going to be absolutely directly correlated with how much you get out of it and how fast you learn something.
Yeah. And actually when Sam and I taught our game dev course, we would do about an hour and a half of lecture a week. And then the rest was just very intense assigned stuff. That was usually about 7 to 10 hours a week of work, right? Because the ratio needs to be introduce concepts. All right, now go fucking do it. Right. And actually this reminds me of, I think there was quite a while back, there was I think it was on Freakonomics. They were talking about Khan Academy, which is an online set of courses where they have lectures about basically everything that you would ever want to learn, ranging from beginner math all the way up to, advanced physics and chemistry and whatever. And a lot of schools around the world are starting to use these lectures to do what they call flipping the classroom, where the classroom time is used for work and the homework is to watch the lecture.
Right.
The idea being you go home, you watch it, now you're ready and you come in and then you do.
You've got questions.
You do collaborative stuff where you actually solve problems with your team or
the doing of the work is the hardest and most important part.
And that's the thing you need the most feedback.
We probably do have it just ass backwards.
It's completely backwards. So that's I think the best piece of advice is try not to focus so hard on memorization or watching or whatever and focus more on doing of things.
Yeah. And then while you're doing it, don't get hung up on the fact that you have no fucking clue what you're doing. Because I think that's the place that causes everyone to struggle with that approach, which is the best approach, definitely. But the thing that makes you struggle is that you go learn a thing, you feel like you should know it, then you go try to do it, and you're just like, how did he do that?
And then just poke it.
Well, you just got to poke it. But the thing is, you just keep trying stuff and trying to learn because while you're trying things and practicing that stuff and trying to get a thing that does work, that's going to be the part that causes you to learn stuff. And you might not even get to the thing. So if you go try to implement Perlin noise and just can't fucking figure it out, right? But you're doing all kinds of stuff to try it. What you'll have done at the end of that. So you'll spend a few hours tackling this thing, trying out stuff or whatever. What you'll have gained at the end of that, even if it isn't a working Perlin noise generator, will be a much deeper understanding of how to think about this kind of problem.
Right. Which, if you go back and maybe read over one of the articles that you started with,
now
oftentimes
you're
like,
context.
oh yeah, you start seeing stuff in there.
Exactly.
And that's actually one of my favorite things to do. If you do a tutorial or something like that, and then you struggle through it, let it sit for a day, and then come back and reread either the article or, in the case of art, walk back through the image set that someone gave you, because oftentimes you'll see stuff and you're like, oh, yeah, that's why they're like, I totally missed that as far as how they were doing this the first time. So there's a lot of that is like coming back to the information once you have a bit more context. So.
Yeah, and it helps, especially for things that are really complicated or that's for some reason. So Amazon Web Services, which we're now using to power all of Rumpus, has very hard to understand.
Their UI is just garbage.
Everything about it is they're the names of all their servers. They've got like 100 services. They all have the same name.
It reminds me of like the first like Yahoo search engines, where they're just like, here's a list.
Yeah, good luck.
You just list of stuff.
We have done no work to make this comprehensive.
And it's gotten, I mean, it's definitely gotten better over time. But the thing is, it's really designed for people who know what they're doing, right? So if you have been a web developer, if you're working for a company, if you've been trained, if you're in that kind of group of people, then this is actually probably not going to be a struggle, I would imagine. But if you're in my camp where you're fully self-taught, so all you know is the stuff you've happened to struggle against because you needed to solve that problem. That is a hard barrier to entry. And so there have actually been, over the past 2 years, I think, there have been 4 or so occasions where I tried to go solve a problem in AWS in Amazon Web Services and just couldn't fucking figure it out. Just like banging my head against it, trying things, like nothing I could get to work. And now I can use all the services without any trouble. Right. And it was because I kept on coming back after I would spend another, 3 months doing web dev stuff, having done a different solution just to kind of get by for now, and then coming back to it and trying it again. And then each time
a few things make more sense.
Yeah. It just makes a little more sense each time. I mean, even just last week, I solved a problem in my development environment that is going to save me a stupid amount of just daily time that I forgot about, because it was a problem that I tried to solve like 9 months ago and couldn't even think about it. And then last week, all of a sudden, I just remembered that problem existed because I just adapted to the shittiness, And it was like, oh, that's so easy though. Why?
So you came in and you just poked it.
So I I literally just poked it, but it's because I had the context now after all these.
You just
months.
knew where to poke it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. This does remind me of all through college, I kept accumulating programming books because I was like, I want to make video games. I want to make video games.
Yep.
And I would buy book after book, and they were so fucking like obtuse. I couldn't figure out how to get in there. And the best metaphor that I could ever sort of come up with was that it was like programming. The idea of programming was this moving Ferris wheel, and I need to get on it without dying. And none of these books would just turn it off for a moment so that I could just get on a fucking car and start writing it, because so much of programming is self-referential, right? To know how a thing works, you need to know how this other thing works. And then you need to know how this other thing works. And they all refer internally in sort of in a loop.
Yeah, it's the same thing with art, which is always funny when someone's like, oh, I want to learn how to draw. It's like, okay, which piece? Because it's the same with the programming. I mean, if you're talking about even just programming at a basic level, you need to know how to deal with files. You need to know how to deal with an IDE. That was one of my biggest hangups. When I was trying to learn it. I was like, why is this?
Download this weird fucking program.
Like its own
to me, the best sort of way to think about it is all of my time learning how to program. It would be the same as if I wanted to learn Spanish by just buying a Spanish dictionary.
Yeah.
Like, here's a bunch of Spanish words that explain in Spanish what the definitions of these Spanish words are.
Yeah, you don't mean a Spanish to English dictionary. You just
I mean I want to learn Spanish by getting a Spanish dictionary, right? Like, you can't, because you need to know enough to be able to use the tool, right?
Yeah.
And so that's actually why it honestly wasn't until I got Game Maker, which used programming concepts, but in its own self-contained development environment. So I didn't need to learn an IDE because the tool is the IDE. Right. And then it used drag and drop stuff that still uses programming concepts, but without the requirement of understanding all the terminology and the syntax and everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, actually, in a lot of ways, so Game Maker 2 has a much more robust IDE.
Yeah.
But Game Maker 1, the sort of the weakness of the IDE is actually a strength to learning how to use the thing, because it was much more just like a text editor with a bunch of windows than it was like a fully fledged IDE.
Yeah.
And now, of course, now that Seth knows how to program, that sucks a lot, right? But at the time, because I remember too, I had the same sort of a deal back when I was trying to learn programming and trying to get started, is because I started with C++ and like I tried Java and stuff. And the infrastructure you need just to do anything with those is
such a pain.
stupid.
And you set shit up for hours. No, like now you're going to print hello world into a black box. And you're like,
what is this black box?
What the hell
is even happening? Yeah, it's incomprehensible. And there's so many ways that you can fail at the beginning that just don't let you even get to the program.
Or even for web, like having to set up XAMPP or LAMP on your fucking machine. Well, what is this? What is happening?
Well, because I now use a Docker ecosystem, right? But the
what does that even mean?
That's like I wouldn't have known what that meant, or couldn't have done it, a year ago even. And now, like I said earlier, I was doing my dual booting over the weekend, so I was setting up my operating systems, but that also meant I had to set up my development environment again. And so I started to set it up.
Hell.
And it wasn't bad because I'm just so fluent in it now. But as I was putting all the pieces together, I was like,
how do I
this is crazy. How many components I have to, because Seth has one advantage, which he just installs Game Maker. He can start making games, which is pretty rad. And
with the one caveat that we have like 500 scripts and objects that I've sort of written and accumulated over the years that do make things better, but I can still go without them. Right. So,
but it would be an enormous.
It would be a pain in the ass.
But your development environment at least is one piece of software. Because mine is the same deal. So once I get into my software, I also have a huge array of library of stuff that I've made and so on. But just the number of bullshit I had to install just to get started.
It's crazy.
It was crazy.
Yeah, there's not an easy on ramp for that sort of thing. No, it's just like, okay. I mean, even with drawing, like, most of the tutorials are like, all right, you're going to go get this paper, go get this, here's the suite of 7 tools you're going to need also.
You need these kinds of pencils and these kinds of erasers.
Yeah. I'm like, what is happening? It's the same situation. Yep. I don't want to set up this huge environment.
How is there not a book that's just called Drawing for People Who Don't Give a Fuck? And it's just like, here's tools you need. Object and other object that can put marks on it.
Done. Yeah, I don't know.
Those are the 2 required objects for drawing.
I think actually drawing on the right side of the brain does a pretty good job of that.
The closest one.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
At least how I remember, because it's focusing on just the sort of the representation, not the details at the beginning, not the details like shading and stuff. And so I'm pretty sure that it could have just been anything at the beginning of that book.
That's the closest one that's done it. Yeah. But there's so many books that you get, and they're like, all right, so get your tool set up, get this set up. I'm like, what? I'm going to have to go to the store for 3 hours before I get to.
Yeah. Well, this part of the problem, though, is that those things actually are really interesting for experts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like if you're an expert artist and you have a passion, like you know why it matters and the difference between using a pencil of this thickness or this this firmness of lead or whatever. And those things matter to you a lot because that's going to dictate how you can make a different quality of piece, right? For somebody who literally doesn't know how to make a fucking straight line, none of this matters. Yeah. They don't care anything about the pencil. It's all about the motions, right?
Yep. Or for somebody who doesn't know how file types work, what the difference is between a text file and like a Word document or whatever, and then asking them to go set up an IDE to compile C++ projects, instead of just grabbing Python. Because the way that I finally got things to click was when I could just run Python and used fucking Notepad++ as just an editor,
That's how I learned programming too.
Yeah, that's the only, because everything else is just a barrier in the way when you don't know anything yet. And so you want to, and it's kind of the funny thing about it. It's just the same way as just like using the wrong pencil and paper when it comes to art, right? Is that it's fine. You get started and you get to start learning stuff. And then only when you start to confront the problems that those tools create. So a Notepad is way worse than an actual IDE, right?
But you can just use it.
It's only worse once you're good enough at using the text editor
to know why
that you can understand why it's bad. Right. And if you jump right into the really complicated thing that solves your problems for you without understanding even what your problems are, then
what are you doing?
Well, and I mean, honestly, the big moment for me, it was even just a few years ago, since I learned how to program in Game Maker, that all of my programming understanding was sort of baked into that IDE, right?
Yeah, right.
But once I started using Python, I was like, wait a minute, I could just open up Notepad, write up Python code, and then I just save the file with .py.
Yeah.
And now you can run it.
And now it's a Python program. I'm like, oh my God, a program is just text. Like it's just me because of file extension, that dot whatever. It means nothing. It doesn't change anything about the file. It just tells the computer, hey, use Python to open this. And then
this is the same thing when I was, I've been taking a couple of these digital art courses and stuff to try to sharpen my skills. And one of the YouTube tutorials I was looking at was this guy trying to show you how to draw Kirby in Photoshop. And the solution.
I think he's trying to show you how to draw Kirby.
Because the solution he had to go through to make a circle in Photoshop was fucking insane. It's like it was 12 steps. It was in different UIs. It was using blur mode, like different multiply modes and stuff. And I was like, what is happening? This is not a drawing program. It's not a drawing program. So don't use it, especially if you're just starting and it's just like hopping into doing C++ with an IDE, trying to draw in Photoshop as a beginner. I'm like, what is happening? If you go to Krita, which is actually meant for drawing, they have a circle button. You can just draw circles with the circle button. And it's like, use the
circle button.
Yeah, use the circle button.
Make a circle.
Yeah, because I think that's the only reason I was able to draw using Inkscape, was because it's just you just grab the circle button and you're making circles now. Yep, you don't have to worry about all this.
I mean, that's something that we've often kind of talked about as a suggestion. Is like if somebody has no art background at all, use Vector because you can sculpt your art. You
wiggle it around into shape as opposed to having to.
Yeah, and I mean, same thing. If you're completely daunted by the idea of programming, pick up GameMaker and just start fucking around with drag and drop or something. Because that's the easiest intro you're going to ever find anywhere, right? Yeah. And you get instant feedback. You put a thing on the screen and you see it moving around immediately, right? So, all right, we've gone way over time. So don't worry, we'll just bill it directly. Yep. We'll bill it directly.
We'll steal this time for the next episode so that it averages out fine.
There you go. Yeah,
that's right.
All right, wrap it up.
Any other final thoughts, you guys?
Wrap it
up. Okay. All right. We'd like to thank our producer, Fat Bard, for making us sound good. Thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord and forums running. And we have a whole bunch of new moderators.
We do.
So congrats to all those people.
We got like a million.
There's a million of them. We don't have the list on hand because it's too long to fit in the room. So
I want to keep on adding more over time too, so that eventually we have more moderators than anybody else.
The goal is to have everybody be a moderator except for the newest person in the community.
Yep.
So and they're exerting really intense peer pressure. Hey, your name isn't purple in Discord. It's real.
Yeah, how you feel about that? Anyways, so also, if you'd like to get more involved in the Bscotch community, you can hop into our Discord server, which is at discord.gg/Bscotch. And if you'd like to adorn your body with Butterscotch merch, you can check out our shop at shop.bscotch.net. And also, we need to start moving this inventory because we need to figure out what to do for Levelhead merch.
Yeah. Also, if you guys want It's 20 Great Teen shirts, let us know because we're thinking about doing that.
Yeah, because the character from Levelhead is Great Teen as well.
GR18.
So we were thinking of having shirts that say it's 2018. Who gives a fuck on them?
Yeah,
but that might
not
be
sell as much.
Yeah, it's good for a podcast brand, but not really good for the studio.
It's a little off-brand for the studio. Yeah. So, also, if you'd like to send us some stuff, you can send it to our mailbox, which is over at mailbox.bscotch.net. Did we get that updated?
Yep.
Cool. So it should actually get to us now. So that's good.
Well, I mean,
that should have before.
It should have before anyway. I don't believe for a second that because we said PO instead of just box because the address is still the same. It was only if someone was being a real dick. Like there's no reason that should have happened.
Okay, we'll see. Yeah. But the address is totally correct. Yep. So go ahead and go to mailbox.bscotch.net and you can find it there. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.